Welcome to the HR Champions podcast with me, Phil Scott of HR Recruit, where I bring you leaders from the HR community. In our podcast, we'll be discussing their careers to date, their passion for HR, and the challenges they faced along the way. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Karen Seth, People Director at Coop. Karen has had an illustrious career, starting pretty early on with 16, 17 years at Sainsbury's, and the most recent role is 7 years nearly at the Co-op. Now, I find the Co-op an absolutely interesting and fascinating business, so I am delighted to introduce Karen onto the show. But Karen, I'm going to just pass it over to you. Please give the listeners a brief introduction to who you are.
Yeah, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, whenever it is that you're listening to this. Yeah, so I'm Karen Seth, I'm People Director at the Co-op, but I was at Sainsbury's for quite a long time. And before that, I actually worked in hospitality. My career started as a line manager in hospitality, which is, I've always loved service and service industry. So that's tended to be where I focus, and fell into HR. Funnily enough, it had always been a bit of a passion, because when I was doing my A-levels, I remember looking at two very diverse things about where I wanted to go. One was accountancy, and the other one was, I remember writing off to the Institute of Personnel Management, as it was at the time. And funnily enough, I've come full circle to that point now where I am today. I think what I've loved about it is that I've been able to take some fantastic opportunities through my career, and I'll talk about those hopefully as I answer Phil's questions. But I've had so many opportunities to learn and do different things, and traveled a lot of the country, etc., by doing it. And you know, I've really enjoyed it, and my time particularly at Sainsbury's and at the Co-op has been brilliant, because being part of such big companies, you get to touch, deal with, involved in many, many different things, and very diverse businesses as well. Not just food retailers, which is what you presume by both of those, but many of the different workings that go on behind the scenes and all of the different elements. And I've also spent a lot of time doing industrial relations, which is quite unusual these days, which, well, I'm one of these very sad people that absolutely loves it. So yeah, I'll let Phil ask me some questions, otherwise I'll just keep talking.
So, I mean, you covered off your early career, but what is it you particularly like about working within HR?
I think it's the fact that you get the ability to be close to a business and really see how the business moves, and working with people directly, but at the same time you get to think and act strategically. I've been offered a number of roles over the years, doing operational roles, and if we're being honest, you know, as soon as you put a P&L against a role, you can earn more money. But it doesn't interest me, because quite often I find them not as broad or as challenging, or the variety, which I think is the crux of it, and that HR has given me by doing that. The fact that I can work with many, many different people in many different industries with a transferable skill, which I found, you know, comes back again and again. However many years you've not done it for a specific interest, it still comes back, and you enjoy picking up another challenge with it.
Super. And I mean, your career has progressed, you know, extremely steadily over the years. What would you say is the secret to that progression?
I think for me, I'm a great believer in a phrase, and there's actually a great book called Squiggly Careers, and that's how mine's been. It hasn't been vertical, you know, I haven't climbed a ladder, so to speak. I've tried to add as much breadth and depth to everything I've done. As I've gone along, working in different industries, doing specialist and generalist roles. I've even stretched into charities through my board roles that I do, and into the NHS with my board role that I do as a non-exec director. So I've tried to learn as much as I can along the way. And I think it's really given me the strength that I've now got behind me, and a credibility that makes me a very commercial business partner overall. And I can sit on a board and have an equal voice to everybody else, not just from an HR perspective.
Super. And I know we spoke about whether, you know, some people just stay within, you know, the silo, or some people get out and about, involved in the business on a wider scale. Would you say that's pretty important to progress, to understand the wider business operations?
I think it is, because when you're supporting and enabling, you know, people solutions, and supporting the people within a business, to understand that business is key. And some of the ones I've worked in, I've not worked within the businesses, but I've had to go and understand them. Funeral care was a very, very different business to food retail. Logistics was a very, very different business to both of those. Our legal services that I looked after was a regulated business, but I had to understand the different nature of it. So you can support recruitment, you can support development, you can support career paths, you can support about transfers in and out of those businesses so people can develop their own skill sets as well. If you think about culture, the cultures can be very different in those environments. Warehouses, funeral care, people are dealing with bereaved people all of the time. How do you support their well-being? So I think by having an understanding, talking to the people that work on the front line on a day-to-day basis really helps you come up with the right solutions, not one size that fits all. And this is an answer that's worked here. It's about being able to understand it, think of what you've done before, think of all the things that are available, going out to research, and then coming back with solutions that are right at that moment in time for that particular business.
And you've been involved in a few awards over your career and won various awards. Which awards is it that you've won, and what's the secret?
I think the thing that I'm proudest of, we've won lots of individual awards across both of my time at Sainsbury's and at the Co-op, for different programs that we've run and different entities like our career prize. But the two big ones that I would mention are both about team awards. We won the best retail HR team in Sainsbury's when we did a big restructure and reset ourselves, which I'm so proud of. And then I think it was I get confused with the pandemic. It's either last year or the year before, we won the special award as Co-op, as the people team at the Co-op, about everything that we'd done, delivered, moved forward in the time that we've been together as a team. Because there's something for me that it's not about just individuals or small parts. It's about the sum of the whole, which is why I think I'm probably proudest to have been part of those two awards more than any others.
And what do you think was recognised? What is so special about those teams?
I think both of them at the time, we were very innovative in our design of our structures and how we came together and worked, and some of the things that we were testing and working within both of those different awards, and challenging ourselves to be able to move forward and allowing people to have a really big voice in how we moved it forward as well. So the testimonies were very strong out with, and it was something that people out with the two organisations came to look at what we were doing as well.
Good. I know you're extremely passionate about the Co-op, and obviously there's a lot of different employers available, for anyone to go and work for. Why is it that you choose to work at the Co-op rather than other sort of large PLCs?
That's a really good question, actually. I've always had a very strong ethical, value-based approach when I've looked for roles. All through my whole career, I've been very selective who I've worked for. That's why I went to Sainsbury's, because their ethical basis and the nature of the work they did and their product, even though a big PLC with a responsibility to City. And then when I was leaving Sainsbury's, I was debating where to go and what to look at, and who I wanted to go and work with. And the Co-op was curious for me because it's a very, very different model. It's a mutual. It's owned by its members. We don't report to shareholders. So if you buy a product in one of our shops, or if you buy a funeral with us, you're not giving money to unknown shareholders. You're giving money back to your own community, which I don't think a lot of people realise, because somebody was saying they'd bought a funeral and they wanted to go and put money in the pocket of a local funeral director, which is not wrong. And I think that's really good. But actually, you'd get more benefit in your local community by using Co-op, because the money comes back to the community, not to any individuals. That's what I think is so different about it, that everything we do, we give back millions every year to local charities, into local communities, through work that we do, with trying to reduce knife crime, with the modern slavery campaigns that we run. Because we're a Co-op and not a PLC, we can put our name against bigger things. So one you might have seen recently is the campaign for shop workers to be treated respectfully and fairly in everything that we do. We've led the way on that, working with Usstore, which feels right to me. And we did we worked very, closely on modern slavery prior to that. We can have a very big voice and, set it through. And I think it means that we're also, everything that we do, our products, we try to make sure our products are ethical, the way that we do business is ethical, and the way that we treat our colleagues is as well. Wellbeing's been a huge focus for us, even in some of the work we've done in the last year, making some tough decisions. You know, we've tried to give additional support, tried to look at it from a different lens, and really approach it in a very different way. Just because we are a co-op, we're not a PLC. But on the other hand, we're also a business that needs to make money, and we're not a charity. So it's a very different model to get your head around, really.
Good. And I mean, talking about wellbeing, you've probably got different needs in different areas of the business. You know, for maybe from the shops, and then you've obviously got the funeral care business, and I'm guessing people who work in, you know, in that business on the front line, you know, have got different things to deal with. You know, how do you manage to get a wellbeing program together?
I think one of the things we've tried to do is not treat everybody the same. And it was a criticism probably in the past that everybody was treated as if they were a retailer because it was the biggest business from a size perspective, number of colleagues. So we just did everything the same way in every one of our businesses. But if you go out and talk to a colleague in funeral care, and I did this with one of my colleagues who looks after wellbeing, normally Gary gets asked about pay because he also looks after reward. They weren't interested in that. They were thinking about their well-being and how they can support each other, because they deal with people at the hardest time in their lives. Every time they deal with one of our customers, it is somebody that's going through something that can be quite tragic. And we also, because we do our services free for children's funerals, we do more children's funerals than anybody in the UK. And obviously we're the biggest provider in the UK, so the volume that we do lends itself to the fact that it's a challenging role. But the passion that those colleagues have is phenomenal. It's just about how do we support them. So we go and understand and talk to the colleagues about what it is they need. It's very different from a funeral care point of view because they're dealing with bereavement. They're looking after each other. It's very hard to understand unless you're doing it every day yourself. Our store colleagues, it's very much more about security and safety, and how they're treated by customers from that perspective, as well as, you know, general well-being. So you have to listen and understand each of the differing roles. I mean, our call center colleagues can be dealing with a bereavement one minute, somebody ringing up about products in a store and another. So we've tried to come up with something that says this is what you could pick from. We've developed a Co-op Cares site, which has got access to all sorts. It goes beyond EAP and your typical approaches to it, and it gives you access to different tools, support materials, contacts you can speak to, and we've introduced some specialized training as well, because it's very individual even within each organization within our business as well.
And how do you manage to communicate that to the employees? I mean, you know, are they all fairly aware of what's available, and how do you get that across?
We do it in a number of ways. I mean, we've actually, because we did a crash introduction of Yammer and things over the last year and a half, as you'd expect, many people have probably done, put it in far quicker than they thought. We've got some great Yammer communications that go out, all colleague communications go out, but we give access to everybody for the Co-op Cares, and we do updates on it regularly, but we also do verbal updates through huddles, etc. You know, and we check it through our engagement surveys, which we do pulses for, as well as the annual surveys that we do, which pull it all together. So we do check that it's been heard. We run a colleague voice session, so we feed it through that colleague voice and then take feedback back into the colleague voice session as well.
Good. And something that you mentioned to me recently that I wasn't aware of is that Co-op are also involved in academies. Is that right?
It is. We own a large number around, mainly sort of around the Manchester, Leeds, Stoke area at the moment, but it's growing. And we've taken academies that need further development, and we've seen evidence that if we take them over and bring them under our wing, then their scores, their ratings, their Ofsted ratings increase, and the whole approach that they take. We very much involve them in the business. We did anyway, pre-pandemic, when you were in Angel Square, you'd see numbers of groups of school children walking around Angel Square, spending days with us doing work experience and different bits. So, but I think it's really important because we've got a clear part of our future strategy is about future skills. And actually, by having schools, it allows us to have an impact on those children early, as well as through apprenticeships into the business. And we obviously can link the two together as well by bringing apprentices into the business from our academies from that perspective. But there is a really, really close link. It's quite rounded. It's the advantage of being a co-op is that you can cooperate in anything you want to, which gives us the option to do.
So if you go to a co-op academy, you have to do an apprenticeship then afterwards, do you?
No, you don't. But you can do, yeah, which is always a good thing. So yeah.
And in terms of the co-op itself, do they have to sort of streamline and keep profitable and things like that, or what's?
We do, because we need to keep running as a healthy business to be able to continue to support our communities. Because all of our money we either reinvest back in our estate that we've got, or it goes back to the communities through the community funds, or through the 1% on the membership, which I'm sure some of you listening are members, so you know about that. You get to choose where that goes in your local community. But it can be quite challenging, and we've actually, at the beginning of last year, so in January, we relaunched our vision and strategy for the future. So some of what I was just talking about skills, it's about cooperating for a fairer world, about how we can work better with people out with the co-op as well. So we actually had a plan to do some streamlining and restructuring to invest in our vision and strategy. And the pandemic came along. So I've been working on the operating model for the last year and a bit. And we were due to have our first announcement day actually on about the 23rd of March last year, which was the day we went into lockdown. So needless to say, we held that, but we reviewed how we could do it still in the environment that we were in, but making sure we supported our line managers, our colleagues, everybody going through it. But it was still critical for us as a business, not because of the pandemic, but because of our vision and strategy, to be able to simplify, remove complexity in our hierarchy, remove some layers of directors, try and simplify our grading structure to even it out. And we've had to make a number of redundancies. We've also created new roles, but we have had to make a number of redundancies. And it was very much about reinvesting our vision and strategy. So none of our redundancies have been because of the pandemic. We've been very fortunate in that sense. But like many businesses, the pandemic has cost us a lot of money because of all of the different aspects we have to put in to protect our colleagues, rightly so. Screens in our shops, extra PPE for both of our store colleagues and our funeral care colleagues, particularly, equipment to be able to work from home. But we've also taken a lot from it as well, that actually we can now run our call centres remotely. So we've had a lot of very fast learning, like a lot of organisations have, but we've continued in the background to review our operating model and restructure it bit by bit, focusing on support and service, but also some cost removal where we've just got duplication of roles. Some of it being because we used to run in silo businesses, and now we're trying to say, well, actually, you can have one marketing function that looks after all of your business units. You don't need one for each. So we've done a number of changes in that sense as well. So we've had a very busy time, but I think we've tried to do it as fairly and consistently as possible through the last year, because it's been particularly difficult for people.
I can imagine. So I'm going to bring it onto you as an individual. I'm going to ask you to give me 3 people who've been most influential to you.
Yeah. Very early days, a general manager I worked for, he was somebody I'd worked alongside when I was in hotels, and I liked his style and approach and how he dealt with people, how he engaged people, how he involved people. And you always take little bits of people you work with along the way. And it was really interesting because then I was very fortunate to work with a really, really experienced regional business manager in Sainsbury's. And I was newly appointed to a regional HR partner role. And he taught me a lot about emotional intelligence, and he was very different in his approach. It wasn't just about business results. He very much thought about individuals and how they contributed and the behaviours that they contributed. And we took on probably one of the most challenging regions at the time. And it was bottom of the pile, and we managed to turn it around. And build a team and create a team that then was able to sort out some of our challenges with succession and talent. The other person is my current boss. I've worked for her for many years on and off. And she's got a very broad lens on how you run a business. She's always challenging it. She trusts the people that she works with, so you get a level of empowerment. And I've always loved the challenge, though, that you get alongside the trust to be able to get on with your job and what you do. But I've always felt fundamentally supported as well by her. And she's given me some fantastic opportunities, and I've taken them, as you can imagine, and developed myself along the way. But it's come from building relationships and having honest conversations about what you want to do and what you don't want to do, what you think suits you, what doesn't. But the relationship is first and foremost, I think, in each of those three as well.
Good. I totally agree. You take the best bits of people you work for. I also take the worst bits and make sure I don't replicate them.
I know, I absolutely agree with that. And you think, no, really?
Yeah. It's very much if there's situations and you think that didn't make me feel good, I'll try never to do that to people. When I become in management. So, another question for you: Have you ever had any setbacks in your career, and if so, how did you deal with them?
Yeah, I think everybody does at one point or another, and I think you learn from the bulk of them. I think working with a challenging business partner was one of mine. It was really tough. They excused themselves, probably in my first session with them, to say, I can be really difficult, you'll have to help me with that, but meaning by help me get out of the situation, not help me get better. And I think that took me a while. It was my first appointment being promoted as well to a senior manager. So it was quite a tough role for me to do as well. And I had a big learning curve for that first bit. I had another setback as well, and we talk a lot about bullying and harassment and about being treated properly, and I was impacted by that, and it's a really tough thing to go through, because sometimes it's about a personal relationship. So to what we were saying before, is personal relationships can be great, they can also be quite negative, and they can be really challenging to go through, and it's about having the right support around you, and even the people to help you get through it and work on it as well. I've had other setbacks about potential strike action, and how do you get through that when it's you're the one doing the negotiations and you're at risk of putting the business into strike and things. But I work with others to get through them, and I think that's probably my common theme, is about having people around you that support you, you work with, you collaborate with. You're not an expert in everything, you're not on your own in anything that you do in these roles, are you? So if I have a setback, I learn from it, but I also reach out to the people that I work with. So
did you get through the strike? You managed to navigate?
Yes, we didn't have, I'm just going to touch lots of wood, we got through the ACAS discussions before we got there, so yeah.
Fair enough. And another question: have you made any mistakes in your career, and if so, what advice would you give to others so they don't make the same mistakes?
I think I've learned over the years to trust my instinct about roles and about how you approach a role and the way that you go into it, because I know what I'm suited to now and what I'm not suited to. I probably didn't know that when I was younger. And I try to take something from everything that I do, but everybody makes mistakes. If you want a classic, I sent a confidential email with details of some managers to one of our national officers in trade unions, because the joys of emails and how it picks up email addresses sometimes, and when you're multitasking. Anyway, that was an interesting conversation when I had to ring him up and say, you shouldn't have had that, I'm so sorry. And he found it quite amusing. So yes, these mistakes happen. I now triple check things like that, but I think some of them come from really taking time to reflect and not react as well to things, and look at it in the bigger picture and the scheme of stuff as well, because actually sometimes they're not that important and you can resolve it, and it's about being adult in how you approach it as well. If I hadn't picked up the phone to him and just said, look, and I hadn't told people, it would have been much worse than if I'd not said, look, I've made a real error here. It's one of the that happens. Yeah.
I can associate that one. I mean, the amount of times I get sent emails from clients, and you think that's an internal email. What am I on that email for?
I
Luckily,
know
it's stuff that means nothing to me, so I'm able to delete it.
You've been very busy sometimes. It happened to me. Somebody sent me something I shouldn't have had. Luckily, it came to me as a people director, not somebody else. So yeah, it could have been worse. Yeah.
Absolutely. So give me one common myth about your profession that you'd like to dispel.
Oh, I think there's an old adage of being a bit soft and pink and fluffy and administrative, and it's not. It's actually quite a tough role, quite a commercial business partner role. You've actually got to make some quite tough decisions and be very measured and very balanced, and you have to be very business savvy. A lot of people think you do all the nice stuff, or you do all the recruiting, or you do, but we don't. Most of that is done by people managers, line managers. We enable and support, and quite often are the ones facilitating the tough bits in the background. So
yeah, absolutely. What advice would you have to anyone who's aspiring to get to where you've got to?
Take every opportunity, have the good conversations with people that are key stakeholders for you. Get a mentor, whether they're internal or external, somebody that you can just bounce things off. Don't be frightened. You can learn in the role. Don't think I've never done that before, so I'll never be able to do it. If you've got some great credibility behind you of your ability to learn, to be curious, you'll always be able to succeed. I think there's a great quote by Richard Branson, isn't there, is about you can always, about the skills you can gain as you're doing it. Nobody's got all the answers as they move into a role. If you did, it would be very boring as well.
Yeah, no, it's great advice. That absolutely great advice. And I mean, that sort of brings us up to time. I mean, I could go on all day. To be fair, there's so much about the organisation and about your career that I could ask. But now, if anyone does want to reach out to you, are they able to do so? And if so, what's the best way of doing that?
Probably LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, and I do read my emails because I watch LinkedIn, because I think you can learn an awful lot if you follow the right people, businesses, etc. So you can get some really interesting stuff on there. So yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best route.
Great. Well, a massive thank you to you, Karen, for taking part in the HR Champions podcast. I hope everyone has enjoyed this episode and stay tuned for more episodes. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Phil.